So, what is happening, wrestling fans? Welcome back to the Intermat Wrestling Podcast. And yes, we are missing two of the four of us that are normally here. Austin is fighting the flu with his family, and Kevin's getting ready to head away on a vacation. Damn,
Oh,
damn, Kevin. I wish we were that special.
it's
Didn't I
rough.
mean? Didn't
Rough
everybody
life,
just
Kevin.
have a vacation? Didn't we just have like these holidays and stuff? He's just like,
Yeah, I just had like a month off
yeah.
from teaching, so that was cool.
So he's
But
he's
three
gonna
snowflakes we
he's
got in
taking
Virginia
another
shut us
one.
down.
Yeah, he's
That's
taking
fine.
another one. I mean, it's kind of like taking a peek and seeing what 2025 has to offer and being like, nah, not gonna do it. I'm good. So you just got the two of us. We're gonna dig into a couple different topics. Um, some of the stuff that went on last week, some of the things that we saw today, literally, with women's wrestling. Um, but first, let's dig into some of the comments that we had on last week's show. And the one really stuck out, and it's the one that I want to discuss from Leo Thompson. And he says, when it comes to us talking about participation and the parity that we've seen in other years, and obviously last week we talked about the fall off with college holiday wrestling tournaments and how they're very different. And he says, the thing is, these guys aren't competing to entertain any of us. They are competing to win in the end. And while I agree with half of that, the second sentence is definitely true. They are definitely competing to win in the end. They are, sports are there to entertain us. They are. We can't complain about not getting top billing, right? Not getting the attention that we deserve, only being on ESPN at certain times. Obviously, there are a lot more broadcast companies. We've got Big Ten, we've got ESPN Plus, we've got, Flow, UFC Fight Pass coming in as well, among other things that are doing any sort of broadcast. But it is about the entertainment, and it is about, you know, I was not touting that they have the attendance record if they don't make that happen, right? There, it's about putting butts in the seats. It's about having program support. So I want to push back on that. Like, they are trying to entertain us. That's what sports are for. So like I said, I agree with half of it. In the end, they certainly want to win, but if they don't want to put on a show as well, and not so much to the fact where they're doing backflips in every match and they're doing the craziest shit out there, but the fact that they're trying to bring in more, they're trying to showcase their athleticism and their grit and everything else, and they're trying to show off their team, like, that has to also be, on the list of things that you want to do, right? When I talked to Goodell at the beginning of the season about the way they always pack Jersey Mikes, and he's like, that's the number one thing people should be trying to do, is making phone calls to get fans into these arenas. That is the right mentality, right? You want to coach the team, you want to support the team, and you want to have people that also want to support the team. So even though winning does solve everything, where Penn State is going to pack the house because they're Penn State and they're also in a hotbed where, you're in Pennsylvania, tons of teams and tons of fans want to be around Penn State, but teams want to go, or fans want to go to these matches. So I can't, I do not agree with they're not there to entertain us. As an athlete, as a former athlete, I wanted to entertain. I wanted people to come out and see me show off, right? Especially as a 20 something, as a college kid, I'm repping my alma mater right here. Like, when I was at Wilkes playing football, I wanted the girls to come out and see me, right? Like, I wanted people to notice that I made a play on Saturday, right? Like, you want that. So yeah, entertainment is a very big part of what these guys are doing. It's, even though it is about a championship, they certainly want to entertain. What are your thoughts on the comment of they're not there to entertain us?
Well, I mean, yes and no. It's a valid point that ultimately their goal and their focus is to win,
Sure.
but it's not just solely on individual wrestlers to be entertaining either. And if you look at kind of the gamut we have of teams and their approach to marketing, their approach to in-venue events, things like that, and how things are produced is completely different. You have some schools that are bare bones, and it's like a high school duel. Like you go out there, you shake hands, you wrestle. There's no No scoreboards, no nothing extra, no giveaways, no nothing to engage the fans. It's just straight up, we're going to throw out our 10 guys, you throw out your 10 guys, and that's the end of it. And then you have teams who have taken, that marketing to the next level. I mean, we all saw the NC State, Oklahoma State duel. I mean, they've done a fantastic job, and they've improved even more since David Taylor's been there, because he has the mind for marketing that's really driving that.
Mhm.
But that entertainment value has to be there, or you're not getting the butts in the seats. Um, there's only so many wrestling specific fans, right? There's only so many
Yeah.
of us that grew up in the sport and love it for what it is, and love the purity of the sport and all those arguments that we always make about how great it is. If you want to grow it, though, we need casual fans, and casual fans aren't going to be there if it's not entertaining. Casual fans aren't going to watch a tiebreaker 2 right out and be entertained by it like we are,
Mhm.
because we see the nuances of it. They want to see the big moves. They want to see the big takedowns. They want to see a blast double. They want to see throws. Like, there has to be some entertainment value to it. Otherwise, we're never going to grow beyond what we have.
Exactly, and that's the showmanship of the UFC is why the UFC has become one of the fastest growing sports in the world, right? Like they want to see the knockouts. That's why when there is a match that is wrestling or grappling specific, I mean, hell, let's take Bo Nickel, right? Bo Nickel's last fight, it was a boring fight. It was. I
Yes.
watched it, and it was considered a boring fight because Bo was tactical. He didn't want to get into a grappling match with a grappler. He didn't want to showcase his wrestling. He stood, he threw punches, and he was tactical, and he won the fight. But that's not, and he addressed it. That's not what people want to see. They complain that he fights tomato cans when he goes out and he just beats people up. But then when he's tactical and the fight goes the distance, it's like, well, still, what the hell? Like he's damned if he does, damned if he doesn't. But his
Right.
fight was considered to be boring because it was tactical and it was within fighter IQ. And even though people want to see fighter IQ, they also want to see the guy stand in the middle and just throw punches and just be entertaining because that's what entertainment is. So, you know, you mentioned Oklahoma State and their ability to market, right? They're having a blackout match this weekend.
Mhm.
And they put probably, I would say, probably around 8,000 people into GIA last week against
I think
NC
that's what
State.
they said it was. It was just
Yeah,
over
something
eight.
something
And they're
around
going
there,
for
right?
their attendance record for the season. Like that,
Exactly.
that's something they're shooting for. And they're open about that. They want that record. They want that exposure. They want that growth. They want to have the entertainment value to make that happen. And they're damn sure doing it on the mat. Like, that's a entertaining product. So why not?
Yeah, and David Taylor is certainly not shy about it. And speaking of him, we saw
Dude has his
his
own camera crew.
he
He's not
he certainly does. He wants people to it call it a look at me all you want, but like if they're looking, they're becoming fans, and that's what you want. If he has to be the poster child for, let's make sure we are putting out content. Let's make sure that we are marketing. I mean, hell, you're even seeing Penn State do more marketing these days. You're seeing more of that
To be
in-room
fair,
content.
them putting a flyer out is more marketing than they usually do.
Very true, very
So
true. Because normally they're pretty secretive, but as time has gone on, they're building, the Penn State brand and the guys that have their individual brands, they're doing more, right? You're seeing Carter on Bo's show. You're seeing the entertainment value that they're trying to bring. You're seeing more trash talk. So there is more of an entertainment value that they are trying that they are trying to bring outside of just being the powerhouse that they are and just winning.
Penn State's weird though, and they're always going to be the outlier because Kale has such a different approach to the way he runs things, and it's
Yeah.
it's very closed in and very closed off. And Carter's kind of the outlier in that because he is in his fifth year, going for his fifth title, knows he doesn't really have to operate within those parameters anymore, and you see his personality because you also know what he's trying to branch into, that he's trying to establish that his persona before he moves on to his next step, right? Are we thinking UFC or are we thinking WWE? Either way, like, he wants that persona built up, and he's doing everything he needs to do to make that happen. You know, how obnoxious it is depends on where you're looking at it from, but that's what he's doing.
Yeah, and as you said, Kale and Penn State, they're a one-off product, and I was surprised when this was probably a couple months ago where it was a video of him and I believe him and Messenbrink or him and Levi Haynes wrestling, and Kale is literally talking to the camera as things are going on, and he's like, I miss 157-pound Levi Haynes, not 174. He's a lot harder to roll through now, right? So like, it's different to see personalities come out of Penn State, but like, I've been able to speak to all of those guys, Kale included. When I saw him in Nashville, spoke to him, right? So I've seen that kind of personality from them. It's not always when you turn the camera on them, but you see the personality. You're seeing what they're trying to put out and their marketability. And, David Taylor, while he is a Penn State product, he is a guy that understands the marketability of, trying to grow the sport and trying to grow the fans that come to Gallagher Iba. And what he said about national duels this week, it kind of got people trending of, see, look, coaches want this. And, we gave a shout out to, I gave a shout out to Nick Costco last week. Nick Costco was doing this in his preseason interviews when all these things were coming out. And I was like, man, I really wish I would have thought of that, that question of getting this out there. So, props to him. And he's, continuing to push this. But as David Taylor says something, then everybody jumps up and starts to say this, that, and whatever of, we should have national duels again. We should have this. And people are talking about the coach buy-in. Goodell was one of the coaches that was bought in when Costco was talking about it before. And he's always bought in when it comes to putting butts in the seats and having a national duels and everything else. So I want to pivot to talking about national duels, and we just did see UNI win national duels, and it was at the UNI Dome, and so they had some really good matches and things like that. So it's not like we don't have one. It was the first time that they had it since 2017, I want to say.
It's
But
been a
like,
while. They've
if
had the
we
D2 and D3 and
yeah,
women's,
D2,
but
D3, and women's NAIA, I think, has one as well. This is the
mhm.
first one they've had a D1 national duel since 2017. And I can remember back in 2017 when, you got those huge matchups.
Yeah,
I think what was it, Gilman that kind of threw his body back with Waters on his
with
back, I
Waters.
think
Yeah,
is when it happened. And but then that happened at national duels, right? And you had Lehigh that also had an upset at national duels back then too. So like, I would love to see the coaches buy in, or at least more coaches buy in, because like I said, we've got Goodell, we've got I think even Eggum. I think I talked to him about it at the beginning of the year. David Taylor saying something about it, I think, is what really perked some ears up, because he is in a program that is one of these trendsetter programs. Oklahoma State is certainly a trendsetter program, so that's why I think people just kind of perked up when he said it.
I think it's really easy to see what coaches are on board by how they schedule. All right, if you're looking at teams who are seeking the best competition out of conference and trying to make those duels happen, those are the teams that are going to be bought into the idea of a national duels and a bigger test during the season in the dual format. You have teams who shelter themselves from the dual perspective and hold out for big duels during conference season. Right? Looking at Penn State, we're not doing a lot of out of conference stuff, right?
Yeah.
But then you have, like, I was hitting on Stanford the other day. They've had Iowa, Iowa State, Mizzou. They have Arizona State. Like they're trying to hit as much out of conference competition as they can before they even hit the ACC.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of teams who are like that. Mizzou always looks for competition. Oklahoma State has really stepped up and looking for competition. There's certainly teams who are very evident about wanting that. And those are the coaches that we're going to need to kind of lead that charge to be able to get through to the ones who aren't as bought in right now.
Yeah, but I think the other side of that is those none of the teams that you just mentioned are in the Big Ten, right? So like, that's another reason why you're seeing Stanford want to step up and have these out of conference duels, because their schedule warrants it and it has
Right.
to, right? Where Penn State, yes, they are the big boy on the block, but like, they don't have to seek out of conference competition to get that best competition, because
Right.
the
They're
Big
going to
Ten
have
is
four
is
top
the
10
Big
duels
Ten.
because they're the Big Ten, and that's how it's going to work.
Exactly, right? They're going to see the biggest matchups just naturally built into their schedule. So those teams that are outside, the UNIs wrestling,
Mhm.
Nebraska, the Oklahoma State and NC State, right? You're going to see those because those conferences have to. they don't have the biggest and baddest competition, not all the biggest and baddest competition in conference. So they have to travel outside of their conference to make those things happen.
But then you look at Rutgers, who is in the Big Ten and has
Yeah,
that
they
same
had what,
conference
like
schedule,
they
and
had
they
like
go out of
10
conference
duels
and
going
have,
into the new year.
yeah, and they had multiple top 10 duels. Like they came down to Virginia Tech. They've gone back and forth, and they've had a tough schedule. Like they don't mess around with that. So Goodale is certainly, one to kind of lead the charge on that, and he's been vocal about it. I think Schwab was pretty vocal about it this weekend in kind of stating we don't want to be considered a mid-major. We want this to be a bigger thing. We want this to be more meaningful. Not to say
Mhm.
that it wasn't meaningful, because they looked great and they've got wins over huge teams this year to back that up. But if we're really looking towards this national dual title, which I think more people are on board with than not, um, just kind of based on my interactions with people, I think we have some kind of top tier holdouts that are really kind of stepping us back and keeping things from happening.
Yeah.
And it's not hard to see who those teams are.
Yeah, and the thing about it though is Penn State's never vocal about anything that they're doing anyway. So like
I've heard
even
Kale say like 3 words ever,
yeah,
so I don't think he's vocal about anything.
he's that's the thing is like they're not vocal about their intentions of doing whatever, right? Like if they're gonna do something, they're just gonna do it, right? Like it's
Right.
not like they were promoting the fact they were going to be in Nashville, right? It was just another date on their schedule. So they were there, they went, full on starters with every single one of their matches. Even though they weighed in 20 guys, they're only their 10 starters were the ones that wrestled. And then you have comments, people on Twitter that are talking about, there's somebody that I actually bookmarked it, and he said until Kale buys in, it'll never happen, which means it'll never happen. And I don't want to say that, because if that was truly the case, then Kale's not going to the journeyman event in Nashville, right? Like that's for me, that's parity for a national duels. It may not have been the biggest parity when it came to competition, but he's going to this event and wrestling, and the team is wrestling multiple duels in a day, three
Mhm.
duels in a day. That's
Against top competition.
against top competition, right? Like
And
he's
that's
he's going to that's how that's how I don't think that it's a never type of thing
agreed.
with that type with Penn State. Or I mean, obviously Oklahoma State is in with what David Taylor's talking about. I think Iowa would be in as well. They'd be crazy not to be in with the other top tier teams that are going to be there. So what? Say you see Penn State twice in a year because you see them at national duels, or you see Oklahoma State twice in a year because you see them at national duels. Like let's let's make that happen, right? Like what was it last year where Oklahoma State and Oklahoma wrestled twice? We had two bedlams last year, and
Mhm.
the results didn't equal both times. It wasn't the same. It was not the same both times. So like who cares if we see that match multiple times in a year, right?
Oh
Like
no, we
that's
have to see
only
two really good teams wrestle multiple times. That's
exactly,
rough.
right? Like that means we're just going to, we that means that gives us a chance to grow the sport even more, and the entertainment value is there. So I think that we can certainly have a national duels, and I think that the buy-in is probably there. There's just more coaches right now that are being more vocal about it than others. But I
Mhm.
certainly think that if you put a championship on the line and you make
And
it
that's
a thing, they'll show up.
that's a big part of it too, is the logistics of it. And not to speak for Frank Pop, but when he put together the collegiate duels, that was kind of the long-term thought process, was that
Yeah.
we're going to drag all these, bring in the top teams. Initially, there was a crossover, so there was like a title aspect involved with it. They moved away from that this year and last year too. I don't remember last year. Um, so there wasn't a crossover, but we have multiple really big teams, and over the 3 or 4 years of that event, you've had 8 of the top 10 teams in the country have been there.
Mhm.
So we have precedent of these teams getting there. Now we just need to have, more buy-in. We need to make it more structured. And it's the logistics of it that are going to be really difficult to figure out, because that's where there's so much disagreement. When in the season do we have it? Do we have it before individuals? Do we have it after? Do we have it, before Christmas break? Do we have it after? Do we have, some people were saying Willie is very adamant about it being like an early season event.
Yeah.
Some coaches are saying, let's host it after the individual tournament. So there's a lot of things to figure out with it, but I think, you put the right people at a table and we could figure out those logistics and make it work. And like you said, I think there's more buy-in for it than there are people against it, and that we just need to work through those issues to make it happen.
Yeah, I agree with having it before Christmas.
Yeah.
Um, and the the hard part about it is you have to compete with football. That's the hard part. You know, we're kind of the only sport that is competing with two of the big boys. We're competing with football and their new national championship schedule that they don't have to worry about scheduling around anyone but the NFL. And at least when it comes to like TV rights and viewership. And then you're also competing with March Madness when it comes to individuals. So I think that there is a college football dead period that does happen when you get around championship season.
Mhm.
Hell, we're in it right now, right? The national championship isn't until what, next week, I think. So
Yeah.
those teams have a good bit of time that are off where we could be like, all right, if they're going to be off, let's schedule to be in this time slot and have national duels. And then that way, if we have it kind of splits the season where you have a dual meet season and an individual season. Um, high schools certainly do it. You wrestle for your team state title, you wrestle for your individual state title. And I think it can be done on the college level, especially considering that the college level we start earlier than any other level.
And
So
the season is damn 8 months long.
it's so
There's
long.
time to fit it in. It's
There's time to
interesting to
fit it
see
in
the
and shorten the season.
yeah, it's interesting to see, like, compare the different high school states and how they handle team versus individual and the timing of that, and how that impacts the overall results, because every state does it differently. So
Yeah.
it's I think there's something to be said for looking at different options with that and seeing what works the best at at that level, and using that as some information that we have when we're making a national dual schedule.
Yeah, I'll always be partial to the one that I wrestled in, which is obviously Pennsylvania, where we have team states a couple weeks before in any of the individual stuff happens. Um, that way, and I think what is it? Illinois does their team states after individuals. So you can look at the bigger states that do it and figure out, obviously there's a high school model that's already out there where you could say, okay, it works this way in this state, it works this way in this state. Let's see how we can make it work on the college level. If you add incentives, winning a team title, you add incentives of money like they do in, football bowl season, it changes aspects. It certainly changes things. And we're seeing right now the NCAA is on the look to expand in other sports, even though we do have to worry about what happens to Olympic sports moving forward with this rev share shit. We can certainly do
That's a whole
some,
different animal.
yeah, we certainly can do some expansion though. Not maybe not expansion, but like change the scheduling, make it if we are going to have an 8 month long season, let's break it up. Have dual meets during one select part and go individuals in another instead of, okay, we're gonna have some dual meets and then we've got some individual tournaments with Midlands and Scuffle and CKLV in here, but then we're gonna go back to dual meets again, and then we're gonna go back to individual with conferences, and then we have the NCAA championship. It's it kind of mixes and mingles way too many things in there, I
Mhm.
think. And if you split it up and you said, all right, this is when we're going to throw in our dual meet season, and then this is where we're going to throw in our individual season, where it would probably take some coordination and say, hey, Midlands, why don't we have yours January 6th, and we have Scuffle January 17th, right? Or maybe we have it in February before conferences or something like that, right? Like something along those lines where we start to change the schedule that we have so we do get the entertainment value. We can have the freshmen that get their 5 dates, have it where you need to be the most strategic during dual meet season, where if you have a better matchup, say it is a Nick Bouzakis or Ben Davino, and you're like, man, maybe we should see Davino against Braden Davis instead of seeing Nick Bouzakis here. Let's throw Davino out there, right? Where you have to be more strategic, and they can get those 5 dates during the dual meet portion of things, and then they're wrestling unattached in the second half of the year where they're not worried about anything else and they can wrestle unattached in anything, any open tournament that they want. I just think that we need to do better with the scheduling. We need to do better with the season. That way we are, one, offering up more options for fans, and two, making it easier on the wrestlers as well, instead of having so much back and forth of, all right, we're wrestling here this week, we're wrestling here. Let's change some things up, make it a little bit easy. I know Scott Green, does his thing where he fixes things on just based in one tweet. And, I would love to have, Scott Green be one of the brainchilds or one of the brains behind some of these things, because he obviously has a pretty good handle on stuff. But yeah, I think there's certainly a way that we can go about having national duels and putting it into a more cohesive schedule, so it's better for fans and it's better for viewership and it's better for the wrestlers ultimately too.
Yeah. And as we, are going through all these crazy changes with roster limits, with rev share, with whatever scholarships are going to look like, whatever, however many years people end up having for eligibility now as we move into a decade of eligibility for people,
Yeah.
Things are looking different and we have to be, adaptable to those changes as we go through this. So this is a time with all these things happening, we can take advantage of these changes that are happening now and make changes that are going to be better, in the long run for the sport, and establish some things like this. Like we got the news today about women's wrestling being approved for D1 for a championship, which, we look at Title IX, that helps, level some things out for us now that they have full instatement. So now there's another women's NCAA championship, which, maybe that is some leverage that we can use to add a dual championship. If we have an indoor and outdoor season for track, why can't we have a dual and individual season for wrestling? Same thing for men and women. If we mirror that, because the women have already had the dual title, they've been really on the forefront of that. So, why can't we take advantage of this growth that we're having now and make those big changes?
Yeah, I agree. And, I think the indoor outdoor track seasons is a really good model as well for, a sport like wrestling to look at. We should be looking at other Olympic sports and how they do their championships and how they do certain things as well. And, I love the fact that the news broke today with the NCAA voting yes on having a Division I women's championship. My question is, where do we go from here now, right? Are we going to see Oklahoma State have a women's team? We're going to see Penn State have a women's team. Lehigh already has one. Obviously, Iowa already has one. There's a number of women's teams that are already out there. I'm not trying to poo-poo them or sweep them under the rug. I'm thinking completely about expansion and which one of these blue blood schools that we have that have a number of titles on the men's side are going to say, okay, now it's time for us to bring in a women's team. And not only that, who are these teams that may want to change their competition status, where they're maybe now a Division I in women's wrestling? As I said, like I'm wearing my Wilkes t-shirt. Shout out to Pankale Chander and Coach Loudenslager at my alma mater at Wilkes. But they got approved Division III for a women's team before this season, and they're looking for a coach right now, and they're trying to establish things there. Will there be a team like Wilkes that says, okay, well, maybe we do try to become a Division I. Wilkes used to be Division I way back when, and now they're Division III for different reasons. They actually just put out a podcast with their old coach, Coach Zellner, where he talks about moving from Division I to Division III and all the things that he had to go through when all this stuff was happening. But do we see Division III teams try to jump up into divisions. We've seen it in football where teams are doing this. The only thing that I think is possibly a hurdle is what the NCAA did with like the fees and things that you have to pay. They've made it almost impossible
Yeah, they're
for a
trying to price
team.
people out of doing it.
Yeah, that's the thing is they really are discouraging teams from jumping from one division to the next. But I think that in the spirit of, and obviously the NCAA isn't really going to do much that is good outside of their decision today. In the spirit of it, though, if you want expansion, you need to look at teams that are already established that have really good teams and say,
Mhm.
okay, King, let's bring you up, right? Like, let's make sure that the competition is at the level that it should be at, right? They should be looking at, Life University, right? Like teams that have these established women's programs and say, okay, well, if we're going to say that they can have a Division I championship and we need more teams to be part of this, maybe we look at reclassification. How would you, what are obviously like we both agree that it's a good thing, but like how do we make it so that it is a flourishing tournament for the women?
And that's something and I'm not going to pretend that I know enough about women's wrestling and the
Yeah.
logistics of it to speak eloquently on it. But, I'd love to know the numbers of teams in D3 versus D2, and now how many active D1 programs do we have, and how many are we going to see? Is there a time frame where we can combine these and just make them one big one?
Hmm.
I don't know if that's feasible at all to kind of branch off and make it a more, robust competitive environment. Um, and
Yeah,
that
because
keeps
right
you
now
pretty in.
it's not as competitive as it probably needs to be with Iowa having Olympic
The world
medalists
team.
and world a
Yeah.
world team basically there.
Yeah. Well, that's what you spoke to earlier. That's going to take another blue blood program
Hmm.
stepping up because, they're going to want to be affiliated with the big names. And I think, we've touched on it briefly, but Oklahoma State is, they're in a good position with all the goodwill they have right now to make that move. They have the alumni support, they have the money for it, they have the facilities for it. They're building onto to their facilities, if I'm not mistaken.
I think they are getting a
Uh,
new room or something like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, just a few miles down the road, you have a world team member who's, you know, doing some good coaching at Bixby. Why not grab Jenna Burkett and give her a shot at running a D1 program? I think she'd be damn good at it, and that's, you know, it's all the infrastructure is there,
Yeah.
and the money's certainly there. It's just a matter of making it happen.
That was gonna be my next point is, we're seeing David Taylor. I mean, I'm just gonna say it flourish in his first year at Oklahoma State with, the things that he's putting up. It would be awesome to now see girls like, women like Jakara or Jenna or Helen now sitting at the helm of a team at Michigan, a team at Oklahoma State, a team at Penn State, like a team. I mean, Princeton has Julia Salata that's been there, and they've
Mhm.
been trying to establish things in women's wrestling for a very long time. I guarantee you that Ayers would be the first one raising his hand and be like, "Hey, here at Stanford, let's make this happen." Because he
Yeah.
was already doing it at Princeton. So like there's a number of places. I mean, Adeline is at Oregon State, and the things that she's worked with Nate on,
Mhm.
just awesome. So like I
They have
think
a damn good. They have a lot
they
of
do.
solid women's stuff going on with their RTC there. So that's another.
Exactly. So that's the thing is like this expansion, it's going to one open up, hopefully it opens up more jobs for the women that were probably not going to see wrestling anymore, right? Like
Yeah.
who
And we've
knows
had
if we
the
see them.
privilege of seeing the explosion of women's wrestling in America and
Hmm.
seeing how good of a program we have on the world level and seeing all these women go out and win world medals, world titles, Olympic titles, and become, you know, historic in our sport. And now they're at the position where they're aging out of that competitive level. This would be the next logical step. I mean, Clarissa's doing a hell of a job at
Yeah.
Iowa. I mean, this is kind of the next logical step, and we have all this positive momentum. it's now's the time to capitalize on it. And I know that everything's kind of chaotic with all the changes, but and I think that may be what is holding some people back right now, or some administrators at least.
Yeah, for sure. I think I mean, all in all, I think it's great. I think it's going to open up more opportunity for women. It's going to open up more opportunity for the women that we've seen in our world and Olympic teams to be coaches and to continue giving back to the sport. We've got, as you said, we've seen Adeline win titles, Jakara win titles, Helen, become the first woman to win a gold medal at the Olympics. And, the amount of talent we have on the women's side has continued to grow over these years, and I
And the
think it would,
depth.
and
So I don't
the
think there's a
depth,
drop off
yeah,
in our quality, even if those top tier women move into coaching. We're not losing talent. I mean, we're losing talent, but we're not dropping off in the level of talent
yeah,
as we go down our ladder.
completely agree. So kudos to the NCAA for doing the right thing. I know Skylar Grote has been campaigning for the longest. She's not one to bite her tongue when it comes to expansion within women's wrestling, and she's also one of the ones that has been trying to champion this. And I know she put a tweet out celebrating it as well. And I didn't. I mean, I didn't see it. Maybe I wasn't paying attention to it because I've learned to block out the stupidity within our community. But like everybody was, applauding this today, and so I'm really happy to see it. And hopefully it continues, and we'll see how they go from only a couple of Division I teams, or to making it more robust, or at least try to mimic what we have on the men's side on the women's side as well. Um, but with that, let's dig into some of the wrestling that went on, and let's start with the Cowboys. They put a hurting on NC State,
Yeah, I was a
and
whooping.
it really really was. I did not see this coming. Obviously, like we said, they have Oklahoma State's looked very good this year. And it's prompting a number of memes where people are saying that Oklahoma State is now chasing Penn State and they're leaving Iowa in the dust. Like I think we
Yeah,
need
you
to
got to
pump.
idle down a little bit there,
Yeah,
guys.
I think we
Pump
got
the
to pump the
brakes.
brakes on that because those two teams still have to wrestle this year, and we still have no idea how that's going to come out. However,
And also,
what
nobody can even see Penn State right now.
no,
Like
you
they're so
can't.
far back, we aren't
You
even seeing the brake lights.
Yeah,
So
you're not. There's a lot that needs to be done, and it's not going to take 1 year in order to do
mhm.
it. I love the optimism from Oklahoma State fans, but let's pump the brakes a little bit. I think they're happy with the coaching staff that they have, and the guys that are on that team. But let's remember some of the firepower you have on that team, you're only going to have this year. You're only
Yeah.
going to have Hamity this year. You're only going to have Hendrickson this year. You're only going to have Amin this year. So you're going to have to replace those guys in the next year. But they put a
So we're
hurting
gonna
on
see.
yeah, they put a hurting on NC State, and
Yeah, and the duel was closer than the scoreboard showed.
for sure,
There was a
yeah,
lot of tight matches. I mean, I posted about it and spoke to it a little bit in my wrap up, but like the separation I saw was full 7 minute goes
yeah,
and not stopping for the Cowboys, and those points in the last 30 seconds of the matches that separated probably 4 or 5 matches from being a 1 point win to being near major decisions.
hmm
So there was a lot of separation just at the end of matches that made it look a lot worse than it actually was.
yeah.
But
The obviously
certainly was
the
not a good showing. But
no, I mean when things got off to the start that they did with Robinson beating Troy Troy Spratley, you're like, okay, all right, this can be a thing. But they took a complete turn when Kill Hughes pins Kairini. That was
he
a
put it on
stunner.
Kai too, though. It wasn't
He
just a pin.
did.
Like he
It wasn't just
handled
a
that
lucky
whole
roll
match.
through.
No, no. And that's not, that wasn't the best version of Kai we've seen. He's still kind of getting his weight back down because he started the season at 41. So it's going
That's
to
what I was
be
gonna
an
ask.
adjustment
Is
period.
has he been trying to readjust back to 33?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's going to take some time. Um, that's a big cut for him now, bigger than it was previously because he let his body get a little bit bigger. So he's having to kind of to suck back down and adjust his body back down to the lower weight class. So it's going to be, his test is going to be going 7 minutes strong, and having the gas to do multiple matches in a day, and that's going to be the big test for this year because we know we can go with anybody. He's shown that he's a
He's a
two-time
multiple time
All-American.
All-American. Yeah.
Yeah, he's shown that he's earned that respect. Um, but it's certainly going to be an adjustment to make that change mid-season and be successful at a pretty challenging weight in the conference.
Yeah. On the NC State side, and I don't know if you've spoken to Pat or anybody there. Are they kind of stunned with the result?
I have not spoken with Pat. I'll see him tomorrow or tomorrow night. Yeah, Thursday night. They're coming up to Charlottesville, so I'll meet up with them tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I haven't spoken with him since that match. I talked to him this weekend beforehand. Um, I don't think, certainly not the result they expected.
Yeah.
You looking at it on paper, it's not too far off from what would be the expected result. There's a few upsets and few bigger wins than you would have expected, but on paper, Oklahoma State was heavily favored.
For sure.
Their upper weights are insane. Like that's a murderer's row going from Hamity through Plot and Serber and Hendrickson is going to be a challenge for pretty much any team.
Yeah.
So
all ranked top 10 from 65 to heavyweight.
Yeah. And honestly, that was the best I've ever seen Caleb Fish wrestle. So he's coming on too.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how motivated they are because they went from shutting out Duke on Friday night, which, I love Coach Lanham. I love Coach Erickson and Coach Ramos, but the product that they're putting out is the product they're putting out. Aiden Wallace has had a pretty decent year. Connor Barkett's having a pretty good year, but other than that, you're not going to see a lot of success from Duke. So they're not going to be challenging for the conference.
Yeah,
so they went
Casper's
from shutting
not
them
walking
out.
back in that room anytime soon to suit up. I had dinner with him a couple months ago or a couple weeks ago. Yeah.
He's a fantastic human being.
Yeah, he was here in Austin doing some jiu-jitsu training with Nicky Rod, so we got dinner.
Nice. But to go from that shutout of all but one bonus point victories to starting a duel off really, really well, and then everything going wrong after that is not a good turnaround. So they have UVA on Friday. They're going to be pretty heavily favored, but there's going to be some really good matches. So it's going to be interesting to see how they respond.
Yeah, I mean, it may have been their only win with Vincent Robinson, but it was a good one. He looked really good in that match. He looked like
I'm happy to see him back
on his heels, and he looked healthy. And obviously for the win, he jumps what 9 spots, eight spots, and
he moved up pretty good.
He's now third, above Spratley. So,
he's gonna have a challenge on Friday. Kevion Rollers,
I was gonna say he has a tough one obviously this weekend, and then when do they see Virginia Tech? Not till like the end of the
February 21st. It's the last weekend of the duels.
Figured they usually save that one for last.
Except 2 years ago, and they opened with it, which was the dumbest shit ever.
Well, I think 2 years ago it was probably one of those when you schedule the teams you think you should beat pretty handily early. If you look at mostly everybody's schedule, I mean, hell, I think what is it? Iowa and Oklahoma State wrestle like they're like their last duel before going into conferences. So obviously it ramps up as opposed to football, where football's playing like the Helen Keller School of the Blind in like their second to last week. Wrestling does not do that. But like I said, Robinson looked good. He looked healthy. He looked really good on his feet. 2 takedowns to 0. I know that last takedown was kind of a bit of desperation, I guess, for Spratley trying to get into it, but
it was a great reaction from Vincent.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like Robinson was in position to score the takedown. So, but no, I mean, the other highlights for me in that duel, obviously 33 was a crazy one. But I don't think that I have seen Dean Hamady this offensive ever. He looks really good. Like he looks like he is going to be in the thick of it towards the end of the year.
I
When
don't disagree with you, but I didn't see that in this match. I think
maybe not in this match, yeah.
Singleton probably shut him down more than most anybody has this year. And he was in on some deep shots that he wasn't able to finish, and that speaks to Hamady's defense. But it was certainly a lot closer of a match than I think a lot of people would have expected there.
Yeah, and they have some history, right? They wrestled where was it? Super like in high school, Super 32, I think what it was. I think that's what it was. I think and Hamady like
So
put
has
it
the
on him.
chippiness been there for 5 years then?
Maybe like I said, I think there was a little bit more to the chippiness than what we are probably privy to because they have wrestled in the past.
Get
And
Fretwell on the phone.
I
I need
think that's what
answers.
I did talk to Fretwell about that match. I think he did say that it was a match that they had wrestled him. I can actually look at text messages. Um
But he's looked good this year.
yeah,
Him being at
he said
his actual
Hamity
weight
I, I
is
think
great.
Hamity pinned him in the Super 32 finals is what it was. I think that's what Fretwell said in our text group we were talking about it. So he, major leaps and bounds, I guess, from the time that they were in high school, obviously, but still, it was a scrappy match and did get a little chippy in the end. And but I think I'm giving maybe late props to Hamity because I from what I've seen from him is not things that I can remember seeing from him maybe since maybe his like freshman year where he was a scrappy the scrappy youngster in the new weight class, right? So
Safe to say his coaching has stepped up a tad bit.
just a little bit. I think that has definitely happened. So it is starting to show, that is for
Mhm.
sure. I want to stick with you in the ACC. What were some of the other highlights in the ACC that you saw last week?
North Carolina. I mean, they defended Carmichael Arena and took out a top 10 Virginia Tech team. Um, they did everything they had to do to win. They had a really good game plan. They, shut down a pretty dynamic Hokie squad and kept all the matches pretty low scoring for the most part. And were able to win a lot of matches late. Um, and, a pin from Gavin Kane of TJ Stewart, which why he was trying to hit a high flyer, I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, it seemed very
Probably,
desperate.
yeah, especially for being early in the second period. But we continue to
It
talk
feels like
about
he's
the woes of
just
TJ. He's trying to force things now, and
he's
it's
searching. He is searching for
yeah,
something. There's just
yeah,
like something that he is just trying to connect the dots on and just trying to make it happen, and it's not there.
yeah, and which sucks because they wrestled two really good matches last year, and they were really fun to watch, and not the result I was expecting. I was expecting another low scoring because they both shut each other down pretty well.
Hmm.
So I was expecting another low scoring, likely overtime match. Certainly was not expecting a second period pin from Gavin Kane, who doesn't pin a lot of people. So that was a big difference. And then, not having the top 10 matchup that we were hoping to see at 49 with Caleb Henson and Lachlan McNeil. So McNeil
Yeah,
went out and got a
why was
dominant tech
why was
win.
Henson out?
So he tweaked his tweaked. I'm not going to say because I was told not to say tweaked something during his match against Carter Young,
Yeah.
um, and they don't want to rush him back. So he is likely going to be back this weekend. If not this weekend, definitely for the Duke duel in 2 weeks. They have their bye week this week, um, but they're going down to Boone to wrestle App State. I think on Sunday. I think it's on Sunday, not on Friday. Um, so I'm not sure if he'll be back this weekend, but they're definitely going to trying to have him back for the Duke duel and then to make the run for the rest of the ACC duels.
Hmm.
But They just don't want to rush him back, but maybe that's the difference in the duel.
Yeah. I mean
And then
that,
not
and
having Connor McGonigal,
who's been out for a while.
yeah, yeah. And then Wolak losing to Ogunsanya is his former teammate, which is actually a really good match.
Yeah. Warlock is
But
he's another one of the guys that just hasn't looked quite right in a little bit too.
yeah, they're certainly on a slide right now. And I think it's going to benefit them to have an off week, effectively 2 off weeks, having dual next week, Duke next week, to really kind of rest and reset and get their guys focused for a string of 4 pretty tough duels after that, because they'll have Virginia, um, and then I think it's Stanford, Pitt, NC State, or Pitt, Stanford, NC State. Um, so they're going to have the tough run at the end of the season. So they have their toughest duels in the conference at the end of the season. But Stanford got beat by Pitt. They were expected to win. Um, Pitt wrestled out of their minds. Their upper weights are fantastic, and they're closing out a lot of duels. But that's what kind of stood out to me was that we have so much more parity in the ACC this year than we've had
Yeah.
in the past few years. And as I continue to look at the lineups and look at how people are matching up and look at what these duels are going to look like, I don't know that I see anybody going through undefeated. I don't know that anybody makes that run. Um, I think Virginia Tech could beat NC State. I think they could beat Pitt. I think they could beat Stanford. But I also think those results could go the other direction. It's
Hmm.
matchups are going to be huge. And we saw with the UNC Virginia Tech matchup, one pin made a huge difference, but having 2 wrestlers out, that makes a huge difference too, because that point separation happens really quick. So it's going to be an interesting test to see who's healthy at the right time and how it all shakes out through the next 6 weeks.
Yeah. I mean, you said it. Having guys healthy is, you always know that you're going to go through the year. Guys are going to get banged up. And by the time we get to NCAAs, guys will be, have shoestring, bubble gum, and a whole bunch of tape to just keep their limbs together. But the amount of guys that we have that are out for the rest of the season is crazy. And
Yeah.
the, and for me, the upset, potentially the upset of the year right now already, is Maryland beating Michigan. That was not something that anyone really saw coming, and the loss of Ragusin certainly was felt during that duel. Not taking anything away from anybody else that wrestled in that duel, but that's a big swing when you look, and it's, I believe it was a pin at 33 for Maryland. Um, Instead of what Ragusin probably would have done of getting potential bonus as a top 5 guy in the country and All American. So like that, definitely have to give a shout out to Maryland for sure, as they go 2-0 in Michigan over the weekend, beating Michigan and Michigan State. But that's a big win for them. And you
Yeah.
have to think that, the injury to Ragusin, even though it is just one match, was a big determining factor. Because like I said, Maryland gets a fall there instead of whatever Michigan probably would have gotten potentially from Ragusin if he's in the
Yeah,
lineup
that's
in
that's
that
up to
in
a
that
12
case.
point swing, or up to a 9 point swing there. That's
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah. So very big difference. And in the Big Ten last week, the big one for me was Minnesota, Nebraska.
That
And,
was a fun one.
Nebraska, there was a lot of close matches and a lot of matches that needed referees review. And what sucked for me was it was in Nebraska, and all of, believe, I think it was like 4 out of 5, maybe 5 out of 5, if I'm remembering correctly. But most of those challenges went Nebraska's way. I think there was like one where there was a locked hands call at the end of, um was it maybe 41 or something like that, which the or no, sorry, the 65 with Minto and Sparks, where Minto had locked hands and then they had to go back and he had to ride him out for the last like 6 seconds, right?
Mhm.
Um, but all the other challenges went Nebraska's way. And I was just like, man, I wish that they had independent review where it was just, what they did in Nashville was there was a committee of referees. And if the referees were going to look at it, they would go over and look at it. But then there was a separate head referee that would come over and look at the video.
Just put
And
JR at a table.
yeah, like he would come over and take a look at the whatever it was, and he would then rule on it. So like it was just one extra referee. I mean, obviously there were multiple extra referees because there was guy on the mat and a side ref. Um, but then they had independent, and I'm like, if this works here, and this is something you can do with just one extra referee, this should be able to work everywhere. Where
Yeah.
you schedule three referees for a dual meet, and one is independent review, and you just send him, and you allow him to rule on it. That was the only thing where I was just like, man, it just you don't want to
The
call,
optics aren't great.
yeah, you don't want to call Nebraska biased because they're the home team and they're getting the calls, right? But Nebraska wrestled very well. They looked very good. They bounced back from the beating they took from UNI to start the year off.
Mm.
Um, but there were multiple matches that were really, high powered matches, top 10 versus top 10 guys. Gable Stevenson back in the lineup, was good to see him back. I wonder, I'm actually going to be reaching out to Eggum maybe tomorrow, see if I can set up an interview with Gable to see if we can get some sort of gauge of what his schedule looks like. Um, Now that they are in the Big Ten half of things, I feel like he was kind of, doing his own thing, and he's probably going to continue to do his own thing until the rest of the season, right? But how often will he be in the lineup? Maybe he will be in the lineup the rest of the year because I don't know who their backup heavyweight is, but he might be somebody that wants to take a red shirt, right? So, um, but overall, this was this was a good duel as I expected. I didn't think it was going to be maybe this, wasn't really a lopsided win. It was like 3 wins for Nebraska, 3 wins for Minnesota. Nebraska clears out the last 4 bouts to win it, but like they could have went either way. You had
Mm.
sudden victory to start off between Taylor and Askey. Um, a number of 1 point matches that were in there. Like I said, Minto and Sparks were one of those. Van D gets the win over Wells. Which was a flip from the last time that they wrestled, I believe, at NCAAs. So there was just like a number of duels, excuse me, a number of bouts during the duel that were very close. But it
Mm.
was certainly a very good match that, I think a lot of people should have watched. Now, I'm going to roll right into what I'm looking forward to this week and just kind of sticking with Nebraska because Nebraska, I believe, has Penn State. Yes, they have Penn State on Friday night. So that should be really good. And as of right now, as we talked about at the beginning, Penn State is doing things that, not we haven't really seen them do. Um, they are a high powered team. And I don't think, at least I think we talked about it maybe before we jumped on, but like they they have only lost to number one ranked guys, at least the guys that are in their lineup. The other one loss that they've had was when they put a backup in. Everybody else that's in the lineup, 9 out of 10 guys ranked in the top five. Only one that's not top five is Lillidahl. He's a true freshman that doesn't have a lot of results and hasn't really had a chance to jump into that top five yet. He'll have a chance this week wrestling Caleb Smith, who's ranked sixth in the country. So we'll see if if he's able to jump, with beating Caleb Smith. But man, this is going to be a very good duel. This is the one that I'm certainly looking forward to seeing. The other one that I'm looking forward to is Michigan and Minnesota. Minnesota obviously has a lot of high powered guys, as we just saw. Michigan,
Both looking for a bounce back.
yeah, both looking for a bounce back. Definitely more on the Michigan side than the Minnesota side, with Michigan losing to Maryland. So we'll certainly see. But that, and then Illinois and Iowa. Lucas Bird, he's got to protect that ranking, right? And he's got another big test. He had Buzakis last week. He's got Ayala this week. He's got I think another one coming as well that could be even, another tough one too. So it's going to be a good weekend of wrestling in the Big Ten, and there's a couple of bouts that should definitely be circled. I'm not sure where they're going to be shown. I think they're probably going to all be on Big Ten Network. Um, but yeah, definitely tune in to some Big Ten wrestling. What's happening in the ACC that people should take notice of this week?
Pretty low key weekend for the ACC. It's a weird schedule this year with the addition of Stanford. Previous years, it just was 6 weeks straight of conference duels and no breaks. Um, Now it's broken down into 9 weeks, and every team has at least one off week, so it's a little wonky. Um, and then when Stanford comes out, they'll do two duels in North Carolina on the weekend. So it changes the schedule a little bit. Um, Pitt's got Bucknell. Should be a pretty easy test. There'll be a couple decent matches there.
Mhm.
Um, Duke is at North Carolina. Stanford has Arizona State, which should be a pretty fun duel. Jesse Vasquez and Jaden Abbas will be a good match. That'll be a fun one to watch. And then NC State is coming up to Charlottesville. Looking forward to seeing that. Should be a fun one. Should be a few really good matches there, actually. Looking forward to Roller and Robinson. That'll be a good match at 25. 41, I'm interested to see how Cedeno does in conference. 49, it will be a good match. Bizgins and Jack Geoffrey will be a fun one. Hamilton Fields should be a decent match. So there should be some good matches in that one. And then Virginia Tech is going down to Boone to wrestle App State. So not a lot of in-conference matches this weekend, just the two. So
Yeah, yeah. It is weird with having Stanford in the ACC and kind of how things look with how teams match up from week to week. Trying to see what do we have this week? Is there anything else in the Big 12? Nothing really. It's supposed to have the Iowa State's supposed to have the Cyclone Open. I don't know if that's still happening. I know that's like it was one
is
of the.
that just their inner squad?
I have not a clue.
Oh,
I don't really know. I know
we're not
they've
supposed to
had
do
it.
that anymore.
They've had yeah, they've had it in past years. So I'm not even sure. Um, but to wrap up, and like I said, I realized that we were talking about it before we jumped on, but I want to discuss Penn State's firepower, and I had the reason that I brought it up before we jumped on is I had a friend text me and they were like, man, Penn State looks really good. Is this the best Penn State team that we've ever seen? And obviously last year they break the scoring record. We know kind of how things went. Even with new scoring, they only broke it by like a couple of points. Um, but as I said, they have everyone ranked top five besides Lilladall,
Will
and
likely get up there.
who will likely get up there. It doesn't seem like anybody's really slowing him down as of right now. Um, but then on top of that, they have four matches where they have recorded shutouts. Three of the four matches they've had over 50 points. So like they're doing things that other teams in the past we haven't seen, even though the competition isn't at the highest. Like I will give that asterisk, that caveat. It's not like they're wrestling Oklahoma State and Iowa and all these other teams or Iowa State yet. Those matches aren't happening yet. That their results could certainly change this week with Nebraska because Nebraska obviously does have a very good team. So we could see some changes there. But if they go out and they put up the same amount of points and things look the same against Nebraska that they did against Michigan State, I don't think that they'll shut out Nebraska. But if they look similar, if there's some sort of parity there where it's another 41-3 like they did against Missouri, you got to start thinking this might be the best Penn State team that we've ever seen because of what they're putting out there. Like I said, multiple shutouts, all their guys but one ranked top five. I mean, for the most part, they're actually ranked like top three. I think
Mhm.
like Josh Barrs, he's what, four. So like they're all like top three if they're not the number one ranked guy in the weight class. So like, is this the most high powered Penn State team we've ever seen?
It certainly looks that way. I think what's weird about it is it's quietly incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, you have
Maybe because
Strachey
we're
who,
spoiled with their power, though.
yeah, yeah, and that's part of it too, is that we've taken it for granted how, dominant they've been. But they generally have, a couple standouts who kind of separate themselves from the pack. Just even if nothing else, but bonus point wise. Like, we had Zane who was always looking to rip somebody's legs off. And it just kind of built from there with Bo
Hmm.
and going through. I mean, Starachi does that to an extent. But you don't have any like you don't have the one guy like we've had in the past that really kind of encapsulates a team. It's just a really, really strong team across the board. Uh, I mean, it's hard to find a lot of fault when you look through this lineup.
Yeah.
And like even the guys that, coming into the year or when they signed with Penn State, you weren't expecting them to be, a title threat necessarily. They're right there. So um, I don't know, man. They're damn good, and it's interesting to watch. I think this could be a really good test for them. I would like to see Nebraska, put up a fight. I think Lodal Smith will be a good match. Um, Jacob Vandy is so hard to
To gauge. He
pinpoint
really
what he's
is.
going to do, but he could give give Davis a good match. Hardy Bartlett will be a fun match. Um, then Ness and Lovett. That I mean, there's a lot of really fun matches in this duel, so that's going to be a good one to watch.
Yeah. I
But
mean, Taylor Kasich is going to be good as well.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, we don't have Bubba Sparks this weekend, so I'm a
Yeah.
little disappointed about that. But
Yeah.
yeah, they're scary good, and it good for them. But I mean, there's always the argument that is that good for the sport overall? Is it would we be benefit from more parity and not having a runaway team? But as we've had different eras within our sport, there's always been kind of one team that's been the standout for a large chunk of time, whether it's Oklahoma State or Iowa or now Penn State. Um, it's kind of the way our sport's always been. So Penn State's getting their run, and it's going to be somebody else is going to have to catch up with them and surpass them to make their run.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, there's the funny thing about it is there's a lot of parity this year where Nebraska, every guy ranked. Minnesota, every guy ranked. Oklahoma State, every guy ranked, right? Like UNI looks ultra powerful as well, beating Nebraska. So like there are certainly teams that look very, very tough, but it's parity from that number two spot on down. Obviously, Iowa's always tough as well, and not trying to leave them out, but like the number two spot on down is where there's a ton of parity.
Mm-hmm.
It's what team is going to give Penn State a run, and obviously the talks are going to be it's going to take a Nittany Lion to knock off the Nittany Lions, and that's why everybody is getting all excited that Oklahoma State looks the way that they do. But you got to remember, no one is Penn State, and what they're doing this year, they may surpass their points record from just a season ago. Very
Yeah.
possible. It is very, very possible that that happens with the way that they're going. All the guys that are ranked as high as they are, if you truly, maybe I hit up Nomad and I'm just like, hey, give me, what if they're seeds held right now, with maybe the outlier of Lilladal placing top three as well. What do they look like points wise? Give me your your crazy nerd brain on the numbers. Because it would probably surpass the points that they had last year. If every single one of their guys went out and wrestled to what their ranking is currently right now, or at least the 9 out of the 10 wrestled to what their ranking was, because last year they broke that record and they had and Davis didn't place, wasn't an
Yeah.
All American, but I think every other weight class there was an All American for them. Um, I
Yeah.
can't remember
Sounds
if
right.
yeah, I don't think there was anyone else that wasn't an All American for them last year. So very possible to surpass that. I think and I understand the the old head in all of us that says no, like those teams with Dake, or excuse me, Dake, those teams with Taylor and Ed Ruth and you know and Nick Lee, and they had Nolf and Nickel and Dean, and you know all those guys that they had in the past. Yeah, very tough teams, but they never looked like this. You knew they had like a murderer's row where it was just going to suck to wrestle them, right? The Srirachis, the Brooks, you know, the Deans in there, the Nichols, the Nolfs, like that was tough to handle. But that was a section of their lineup. This is top to bottom, where you're
Yeah.
like, where are we gonna score? Where are we going to do this? Every single one of their guys is a title threat right now. Every single one, Lilladall included. There are plenty of people that are putting their money on Lilladall to win it at 125. You'd be crazy to think that Braden Davis can't win a title at 133. Like
Yeah.
it just is what it is, right? So we'll certainly see what happens, but they look ultra powerful in every single one of these weight classes, and they could very well be the best top to bottom Penn State team that we have seen in a
Yeah.
very, very long time, maybe ever.
I think it's going to be a matter of, are they able to put up those bonus points against the top tier teams, and are they able to put up those bonus points at the tournament?
Mm-hmm.
That'll be the big difference.
Yeah, and it all starts this week, so we'll see how they do against Nebraska. I think that'll be a really good gauge because Nebraska is a top 10 team, um, and we'll see how it all works out. But I do think that they are definitely poised and in position to break their record and be one of the best teams to ever step on a mat. So we will certainly see. People watching this, listening to this, we want your feedback as well. Let us know what you think of that. Is this the toughest Penn State team we've ever seen? Do you think they break the record? Do you think, what do you think of this Penn State team in terms of firepower? So we will certainly see what we get. But I think this weekend is going to be certainly a starter to see what we have in this Penn State team as they face Nebraska, who is definitely the best that they have seen so far. Um, Robbie, I appreciate you jumping on with me tonight. I know the other two guys are a little tied up. One is in a house full of sickness. The other one is packing to hit the beach and have some fun. I think what do you say? He's going to Miami, him and his wife or something like
Yeah.
that. So enjoy the time away, because when you get back, we'll talk some wrestling. But appreciate the talk and look forward to jumping back on here next week after all the dust settles from some of the things that we talked about today. But yeah, hit like, subscribe, leave us your comments, tell us that we're idiots, tell us where we're wrong. Plenty of that from our man Slap the Mat. He likes to give us a lot of feedback, give us a lot of flack, but I love it. Keep it coming, and we'll see you guys next time.